Thank you for joining us for the HHS Black History Month observance. We will be starting our program momentarily. I'd like to welcome Dr. Lin to the stage to open us up. We're honored to have Dr. Lin. He's our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Minority Health and the Director of the HHS Office of Minority Health. Please welcome Dr. Lin.
Good morning. Thank you, Kelly. I'm Dr. Matthew Lin. I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary for Minority Health and the Director of the HHS Office of Minority Health. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this HHS Black History Month observance. This morning, we will explore the work within the HHS to reduce the health disparity and advance health equity for all Americans, including African Americans. An important milestone in this work took place during the Reagan administration under then Secretary Margaret Heckler. With a year of coming on board in March of 1983, she established the Secretary's Task Force on Black and Minority Health. The task force developed a report which highlights disparity in the burden of death and illness of Black and other minorities. When the report was released in 1985, it started the new era in the addressing of minority health issue. And it also led the development of the HHS Office of Minority Health in 1986. Today, like you know, more than 30 years later, we are honored to be part of the HHS family. Together, we have built a network of partners and friends that reach across the nation and around the world. And we are so proud to stand with the thousands of the HHS employees and others who do the vital work. Of course, our work is not done. Racial and ethnic minority continue to experience the same disparity that we documented in 1985. So this morning, we will hear from some of our leaders in HSS who are guiding, shaping, and measuring our progress. We'll let you know that our first speaker is someone who is very special to all of us. Secretary Alex Azar was sworn in on January 29th. He spent his career working in both the public and private sectors as an attorney and a senior leadership role focused on healthcare reform, research, and innovation. From year 2001 to year 2007, Secretary Azar served, as many of you know, as General Counsel for HSS and then as a Deputy Secretary. And I'm so happy that he is here with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Secretary Azar.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lin, for that kind introduction and for the history lesson. I actually hadn't known about Margaret Heckler's leadership in starting these efforts, so thank you for that. That's good for me to know. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you here today for this important discussion hosted by our Office of Minority Health about the progress that's being made in treating some of the most serious health threats faced by the African American community, including the crucial issue of disparities in healthcare access and outcomes. I'm proud of the work that we've done over the years in addressing health disparities, and we've seen important progress in improving health and healthcare among minority populations. The life expectancy gap between blacks and whites is at its narrowest level since 1985. Teen pregnancy rates for girls of color ages 15 to 19 have decreased dramatically since 1990, falling by 56% for African American females. And HIV mortality rates among blacks have dropped by 28% between 2008 and 2012. However, we also know that challenges certainly remain. According to our Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, African Americans experienced worse access to care compared with whites in 50% of the categories measured. And it's likely that this has had an impact on the poorer health outcomes for African Americans. The most recent statistics from 2015 show that black males and females continue to have the shortest life expectancy of any group in America, with the highest infant mortality and a risk of stroke nearly twice as high as that for whites. These are critical health care challenges, both for the African American community and for the nation at large. In this administration, we consider it vitally important to listen to the experience and concerns of those on the front lines who are busy working to address the health needs at the local community levels. This discussion will convene federal, state, and local partners for a critical discussion on African American health, featuring panel discussions on health disparities of special concern in African American communities, including cardiovascular health, cancer, and organ transplantation. I'd especially like to welcome all of the community service organizations, service providers, and health advocates that are in attendance here today, and let you know that your input is vital as we work together to craft policy to address these important challenges. Also here with us today for this important discussion is Dr. Brett Giroir, our new Assistant Secretary for Health. Dr. Giroir, I should say Admiral Giroir, is a pediatric critical care physician, a former medical school executive, and has served in a number of leadership positions in the federal government as well as academia. I personally look forward to benefiting from his insights regarding these and other critical issues. One fun fact about Admiral Giroir is that he was a high school debate champion who was also on the debate team at Harvard. So even though I consider myself quite the lawyer and debater, I'm going to have to really bone up as I get ready for our leadership team meetings against a Harvard debater. It's just unfortunate he couldn't get into Yale. So thank you all for coming today, and know that and please know that we're committed to working with all of you on an ongoing basis to deal with and grapple with these very important and real health challenges and health threats to members of our community, and that we hope to continue to make progress in terms of coming to grips with these challenges. Now, please let me turn it over to Admiral Giroir to give you a better sense of the agenda. I wish all of you a productive meeting, and I look forward to working with you on these issues in the months and years to come. Thank you so much.
I would only let the secretary get away with those Harvard-Yale jokes. But thank you, Mr. Secretary, for leading off this observance and for the opportunity for me to really have the opportunity of a lifetime to join HHS and try to improve with all our colleagues our nation's health. I am truly excited that one of my first speaking opportunities, this is day 6 at HHS, comes with this symposium. And I want to thank Dr. Lin and his staff at the Office of Minority Health for making this happen. We should all be proud of the accomplishments that have occurred since the Heckler Report 32 years ago, as Dr. Lin has said. Your work in the office has substantially improved the health of people across the nation, and particularly the health and health care for racial and ethnic minorities and for disadvantaged populations across the nation. But we all know our work is not over. African Americans still suffer more than any other group from many infectious diseases, from several forms of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and other diseases, as well as a particular interest of mine, because of all the patients I cared for as a pediatric critical care physician, for African Americans stricken with sickle cell disease, which robs precious life and opportunities from over 100,000 Americans in this country. One of the primary reasons I came to HHS is because I believe we have a unique opportunity. This really is the perfect storm of science and technology and passion to make a significant impact on these health inequalities and on diseases such as sickle cell disease. You certainly have my commitment that over the next years, this will be a primary focus of our agenda, an agenda which we have already started developing. For the remainder of my time, because it is my time and I get to do something I really want to do, I want to highlight the world-changing but often overlooked contribution of a legendary man, an African-American man, a man whom I never had the honor of meeting, but who is responsible for saving the lives of hundreds of my former patients when I practiced as a pediatric critical care physician. You see, nearly 40,000 babies a year in the United States are born with congenital heart disease. That means the chambers of their heart or the vessels from their heart are malformed. Many of these have a severe form of congenital heart disease, often known as blue baby syndrome. These babies are blue because no blood could get to their lungs because of their malformation. And when there's no blood to the lungs, these innocent children frequently die within hours or days. So let me tell you the brief story of how an African-American man born in 1910 in New Iberia, Louisiana, saved the lives of my little blue patients nearly 100 years later. Vivian Theodore Thomas had hoped to attend college and become a doctor, but he couldn't afford it. So he began working as a carpenter at Vanderbilt University. In 1929, not a great year, stock market crashed, lost his job. But through a friend, he got a job as a surgical research technician with Dr. Alfred Blaylock at Vanderbilt University, an up-and-coming surgeon. Within weeks, and without any formal training whatsoever, Vivian Thomas was doing experimental surgery on animals by himself. But because he was black, he was classified and paid as a janitor. Thomas and Blaylock did groundbreaking research into the causes of shock, and this work is credited with saving many lives in World War II. But that was not his greatest achievement. In 1940, Blaylock and Thomas moved to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. For Blaylock, it was a chief of surgery position. For Vivian Thomas, the only black employees were janitors, so Thomas could not even wear his laboratory scrubs into the building. When Thomas and Blaylock were confronted with the problem of blue babies, they realized immediately that the answer might lay in a procedure they had been experimenting with for other reasons. But they had no idea whether it could be done for blue babies with a heart the size of a walnut and desperately ill. Well, to make a long story short, Vivian Thomas created the first blue baby-like condition in a dog and then personally devised a surgical plan that would fix it. After 2 years of work and surgeries in the laboratory, Thomas perfected the procedure. So on November 29, 1943, the dawn of pediatric cardiac surgery happened when this procedure was successfully performed on an infant. There were no instruments to do this kind of surgery on a baby, so Vivian Thomas invented the instruments, designed from those he had worked with on animals. During the surgery itself, Vivian Thomas stood on a step stool at Blaylock's shoulder in the operating room, coached him step by step through the procedure. Because you see, Vivian Thomas had performed these operations hundreds of times on dogs, whereas Dr. Blaylock had done it only once as Thomas's assistant. The first 3 cases announcing this revolutionary life-saving surgery was published by Dr. Blaylock and Taussig in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Vivian Thomas was not even mentioned in the article, nor acknowledged by the surgeons. Within 1 year, more than 200 children had been successfully treated by the surgery. In 1968, the multitude of surgeons that Thomas had trained, who had then become chiefs of surgical departments throughout America, finally gave credit to Vivian Thomas and had his portrait hung in the Johns Hopkins Clinical Service Building. He was awarded an honorary doctorate in 1976. Today, the procedure pioneered by Dr. Vivian Thomas remains the mainstay of emergency surgery for these babies, for my babies, saving thousands of lives per year. Surgeons like Denton Cooley, world famous, have credited Vivian Thomas with teaching him and others the surgical techniques that place them at the forefront of American medicine. And as Dr. Blaylock famously said about Vivian Thomas, because of the perfection of Vivian Thomas's surgery, he said, "This looks like something that only the Lord could have made." I'm inspired by Vivian Thomas. Not only was he responsible for my ability to send hundreds of babies home, alive and thriving, with their parents, but he's an extraordinary example of selfless service by a man who persevered to help others, even when he himself received no credit, and even worse, was discriminated because of the color of his skin. So in conclusion, I thank all of you for allowing me to share this very personal story about an African-American man who influenced my life and my practice every day, and his continued impact on babies and families throughout the world. And once again, I'm truly honored to join all of you in our efforts to improve the health and well-being of every single person in our nation, with a focus on bringing health for all. Thank you very much, and I give you back to Dr. Lin.
Thank you, Dr. Youre, for being here today, and welcome to the department. This is the second time I listened to Dr. Youre's talk. Very inspirational, and your story really touched my heart. And I'm sure in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to work together to eliminate the disparity among the minority in the United States, to improve the health care for the United States. Thank you. Our next speaker is the nation's 20th United States Surgeon General and our neighbor at our office in Rockville. He is a board-certified anesthesiologist, and from year 2014 to 2017, he served as Indiana State Health Commissioner, leading over activities such as address the state's opioid and HIV outbreak. His motto as Surgeon General is better health through better partnerships. This is also a fundamental belief at the HHS Office of Minority Health. In fact, the theme for National Minority Health Month in April is Partnering for Health Equity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome United States Surgeon General Vice Admiral Jerome Adams.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Great to be here. Thank you very much, Dr. Lin, for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Youre, for sharing that story that I've heard several times before, but you can't hear it enough. You can't hear it enough because it really illustrates the challenges that we've had to face and that we've had success in overcoming throughout the years. I'm proud and I'm humbled, both proud and humbled, to be standing here with you today to celebrate Black History Month. And it's a celebration, it's also a remembrance for me. You've heard about disparities, you've heard about challenges. Both my grandfathers died from disparities. One of my grandfathers died from a stroke, and you heard Secretary Azar talk about the impact of stroke on the minority community, twice the risk of whites. My other grandfather smoked for most of his life. We know there are many disparities in smoking. That led to lung cancer that was diagnosed late. Again, another disparity. He had surgery successfully, but had cardiac complications from his surgery and died from a heart attack. Yet another disparity. My uncle on my father's side, my oldest uncle, died from metastatic prostate cancer at a very young age. Many cancer disparities exist in the African American community. And so, again, we're here to celebrate. We're also here to remember. And for me, this is personal. It's very personal. And I'm so glad you're all here today as we celebrate and remember this Black History Month. As your Surgeon General, I'm extremely proud to wear this uniform and to serve our country. I have the privilege, along with Dr. Youre, of leading the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, a uniformed service of over 6,500 officers who are dedicated to promoting, protecting, and advancing the health and safety of our great nation. Of particular note, in addition to being excellent at promoting health in our country, The United States Public Health Service, by most metrics, is the most diverse uniformed service. 24% of our officers are minorities compared to 20% of DOD. And we're not supposed to compare and contrast, but I'm pretty darn proud of that. And a whopping 53% of Corps officers are women compared to 15% in DOD. So we're doing a heck of a job in the Corps, and we want to keep on improving. We want to keep on improving. Speaking of DOD, I looked into the Naval Academy. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy coming out of high school. Unfortunately, I suffered from severe asthma at that time, a condition which, by the way, still disproportionately affects black males. And the condition prevented me from serving. However, my many days and nights being taken care of by others in the hospital enlightened me to another form of service through the medical profession. Although I was unable to serve my fellow Americans by protecting them from enemies abroad, I saw that by providing medical care, I could keep my patients and my country safe from infectious disease and from chronic illness. You know, I was fortunate to have been born in the latter half of the 21st century. I didn't have to go to a segregated school, and I was able to apply for college and medical school scholarships that were not restricted by race. While I had to work incredibly hard to overcome the barriers of race and socioeconomic status, many of which still exist, had I been born just a half a century earlier, my choices would have been much more limited. Dr. James McCune Smith found that out in 1830. He couldn't go to medical school in New York, so he had to go to Scotland to pursue a medical degree. And then he returned home to serve, returned home to treat the city's poor. The degree he earned in 1837 made him our nation's first African-American doctor. Dr. McCune Smith opened the door just a sliver, and many others have followed, including myself. However, 150 years after Dr. McCune Smith, while I was a child in the hospital, there were still no black doctors available to participate in my care. Black physicians still comprise less than 6% of all physicians. As a matter of fact, and I shared this story at the White House with the president, the first time I ever interacted with a black physician, someone who looked like me, was in college when I had the opportunity to meet and speak with Dr. Ben Carson. To see a black man making such important contributions to the field of medicine, it gave me a reason to believe that I could do the same. And my parents were teachers, you know, they pushed me hard, but never in my life had I had a chance to talk to a black doctor. That's one of the reasons Black History Month is so important. People question, why are we doing this? What's the value of it? Role models are critically important. If we want to address disparities, if we want to address inequity, we have to give hope to people. Black History Month is about hope. And Dr. Ben Carson instilled that hope in me that I could become a doctor. Although the meeting with Dr. Carson was my first interaction with a black doctor, there's a rich tradition, a rich history of contributions in the medical field from African-American physicians, nurses, pharmacists, all sorts of different health professionals. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was a nurse in the mid-19th century, but strove to further her studies so she could better serve her patients. She became one of the first women ever to attend medical school and was the first African-American woman to obtain a medical degree. Perhaps one of the most well-known physicians in the history of our country, and a black physician, is Dr. Charles Drew. He changed the face of modern medicine. Dr. Drew's list of first evers is exhaustive, but his innovation that has touched millions of lives was his work that enabled the first mass collection of blood. It built the foundation for what would later be known as the American Red Cross Blood Bank. Were it not for Dr. Drew, millions of lives, black, white, and every other color, would have been lost here and abroad. Dr. Drew made those contributions despite the practices of the day, which required blood not only to be separated by type, A, B, and O, but also by race. That's how far we've come. However, it's important to not just focus on opportunities for caregivers, but also that we focus on equity in how we treat people who need care. Race, whether intentionally or unintentionally, is a dividing factor in the treatment received by patients across our country. That is why the work of the HHS Office of Minority Health is so very important. We must all work to ensure OMH's work on health equity is part of and informs everything that we do. In my own specialty of anesthesiology, less than 3% of practicing physicians are black. This is particularly problematic because studies have shown that doctors are less likely to prescribe pain medication to African American patients compared to their white counterparts under similar circumstances. We know black patients are less likely to receive aggressive and standard of care cardiac interventions as compared to their white counterparts. We know that this is in part due to physicians struggling to empathize with patients whose experiences may differ from their own, a problem that we know can be mitigated by increasing the diversity of the healthcare population. It's also critical that we remember black Americans are more likely to bear the brunt of poor health in our communities. According to CDC data, black Americans are more likely to be overweight, to suffer from high blood pressure, and to be in overall poor health. I stand here today as your United States Surgeon General. I look like a pretty fit guy. I have hypertension. I'm pre-diabetic. I have every risk factor in the world for a premature death. And if I have to deal with that, if I can't mitigate those alone, none of us can do it alone. If we want to work towards a more equitable and healthy nation, we must pay attention to communities of color, the communities that people live in, and then address the health disparities and inequities that we know limit their opportunities. In closing, I'm deeply honored to be here today with Dr. Lin, with Dr. Youre, and to have had the opportunity to hear the words from Secretary Azar in celebration of Black History Month. The contributions of black Americans are an important part of our nation's history. I have the unique opportunity as your 20th Surgeon General to be a part of that history. Though I couldn't follow in the footsteps of many others in my family and serve my country in uniform 25 years ago, I proudly do so today. As the nation's Surgeon General, I've been given an opportunity to address health disparities across the country, by race, by geography, by income, and by nature of being a veteran. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity." I've tried to live this motto to its fullest in both my work as a physician and now as your Surgeon General. You have my sincere promise to shine a light on health disparities wherever they exist and to do all I can to lift up our nation's health. But I can't do it alone, and neither can the Office of Minority Health. Health equity cannot be just the mission of OMH, and we can't just talk about it every February. We live in a nation where everyone deserves the opportunity to be healthy, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their profession, regardless of their zip code. We won't get there unless each and every one of us, each and every one of you, commits to addressing health inequity as part of everything that we do, every day of the month, every month of the year. Only with your help can we achieve Dr. King's dream of an equitable, healthy, and prosperous nation for everyone. Thank you, and God bless America, and most importantly, have a happy, healthy, and equitable Black History Month.
Thank you, Jerome, for a very thoughtful and inspiring message. Our next speaker this morning is Dr. Alicia Oh, Director of the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparity at the National Institute of Health. He oversees the Institute leading work across NIH on minority health research and activity. Recent work including research to learn more about the blend of biological and social factors that cause health disparity. Alicia's expertise spans a broad range of health disparity disciplines. His research interests have centered on topics such as improving the health of underserved populations and promote delivery diversity in biomedical research. Everyone, please welcome Alicia Oh.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having invited me to be here, and thank you for your words, Jerome, and to the Secretary who spoke earlier today. It's a real honor to share with you some thoughts about NIMHD, and Dr. Gibbons will also present about heart, lung, and blood and NIH. I want to start with a little bit of history, and I think earlier we heard this quote about an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. And since it is history that we're talking about today, I did want to put this in the context of the last 60 years and what Dr. King restarted for our country, which is far from over. It's a sort of an ongoing, all-the-time issue, but it is what makes the United States such a great nation. And he really was referring to service with this quote. Dr. Lewis Sullivan was the first black Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he actually followed Dr. Heckler's report by starting the Office of Minority Health at NIH. The Office of Minority Health had started already in the department under President Reagan, and then under President Bush, Secretary Sullivan started the Office of Minority Health, which became the Office of Minority Health Research, which became the center of minority health and health disparities, and then eventually the Institute in 2010. Dr. Sullivan also appointed the first director of NIH, a woman director of NIH. So he is, I think, a visionary. And I think in the spirit of honoring those that came before us, it's important to remember this history. Now, Secretary Azar mentioned the data, and I did want to spend just a minute on reflecting on the fact that there have been remarkable improvements in African American health over the last 20 years. This is often overlooked as we focus on the persistent disparities and inequity that exist. He mentioned life expectancy improvements. There's still a gap. African Americans, blacks are 4 years, 3 years shorter life expectancy, but the progress has exceeded projections and expectations. Most of this is due to a decrease in cancer deaths, cardiovascular deaths, and remarkable progress in the control of HIV disease. And we can also see from this graph, if you tolerate data for a minute, the crossover in mortality that has happened in older adults. So over the age of 65, right now, if you get to 65 and you're black, you actually have a longer life expectancy than if you're white. And that's been true for about the last 10 years or so. There's still bigger gaps at a younger age, particularly in midlife. And this is, I think, where we can still do a lot more work. Now, I want to talk about NIMHD, our National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. We have created a research framework that is on our website to capture the excitement about research and science in this field. I think this is something that has really come together over the last 10 years or so. When minority health disparities research began, we weren't really sure what we were talking about, but we are talking about all kinds of factors, not just social factors or access, but also biology and behavior. Let me take you quickly through this route. So first of all, much of the initial set of research that occurred in this field had to do with individual behaviors and lifestyles. I was part of that. We looked at smoking rates, whether or not people did physical activity, diet issues, adherence to recommendations from the physicians, other factors that related mostly around individual behavior and less focused on other aspects. Now we're kind of understanding about the importance of chronic stress, for example, on the individual, reflecting a variety of factors, often that occur in early life, and how that may actually impact your health at age 40 and 50. And so this is, and be able to measure it with biomarkers, not just how someone feels or reports or observations made in the clinical setting. The biological revolution that has happened in the last 20 years, perhaps beginning with the Human Genome Project, but expanding to include all kinds of information about metabolic pathways, that helps explain why we see big differences in cancer rates or diabetes rates or other manifestations or earlier onset of disease or more severe manifestations of disease. And similarly, there's other things on the horizon. The microbiome is already well established as a mechanism. The Brain Initiative has shown us all kinds of networks that are occurring in the brain that is just beginning. It's right now still at the level of mice, but it will, I think, at some point in the near future be involving humans much more, and others such as extracellular RNA. The other topic that has really changed in the last 20 years is the importance of place. There is a saying that says your zip code is more important to your health than your genetic code that is used by researchers in this field. But it's not just your place and safety and green space and access to transportation and healthy food, but it's also people and cultural interactions and social cohesion and community resilience. And we've known for decades that actually if you talk to people, if you interact with people, your health is better. Back in the 1970s, studies showed that if a man was married after a heart attack, he did better than if he wasn't married. Of course, all the studies were in men at the time, so you can imagine. And then lastly, I'm a general internist. I was a primary care physician prior to coming to NIH. And what happens in practice, I think, is really important. And clinical research, for me, is more than clinical trials, more than observational studies. I want to know what goes on between patient and clinician, whether tests are ordered, drugs prescribed, are they appropriate, what's the quality, and I look for NIMHD to expand our research portfolio in this area. We have embarked on the Scientific Advancement Plan, I think, to try to present our agenda on research. It's exciting. It's an area that we really look to champion the field of minority health and health disparities as an institute, and to capture all these elements I've just summarized for you briefly. We want to strengthen the science, and being at NIH, it's really about the science and to really inform and arm our colleagues in the service areas and policy programs in public health to make changes. One of the strategies is to increase the investigator-initiated research. I think the timing is right to let scientists come to us with ideas, and for me to kind of get my colleagues at the NIH to create other kinds of programs that will explore minority health and health disparities from a scientific perspective. We're also worked on evaluating, on reporting our research, and I'll summarize that with part of our strategic plan. And also important to really emphasize the workforce diversity. Jerome's anecdote about, gee, the first black physician he saw was when he was in college is a telling statistic. We haven't made sufficient progress in that whole area, and this actually is an intervention that could probably make a difference. The statistics from AAMC show that as of the graduating class of 2014, something like 5 to 6% of all physicians, 5% were African American, 5% were Latino. And that's just not good enough. We need to make a difference in that area. Now, NIMHD has launched into supporting trainees. We have now a K program that has just been started, although we've had other kinds of Ks. We sponsor a week of Summer Institute at NIH for postgraduate fellows and trainees, as well as assistant professors, to get them engaged in what NIH is about and to give them some aspects of research in minority health and health disparities. We have a robust loan repayment program. We also fund pre-doctoral and doctoral students with individual grants and diversity supplements, which are available to individuals from either underrepresented minorities or socioeconomically disadvantaged background, or those with disabilities. And that's an NIH-wide program. Our strategic plan is in an advanced stage right now, although we are entering the final and most important phase. We have designed this sort of category of our goals and categories and goals. Categories to look at what NIH does in minority health disparities includes science, research, but it also important research sustaining categories. And the research sustaining categories include training, capacity building, and inclusion, so the diversity in the clinical research. We also design issues around collaboration and dissemination, particularly on building a research community. And some of this is reflected in our work together as directors of Office of Minority Health, and which I have been very engaged with over the last 2.5 years. And we are now in the phase of looking at having listening sessions that are being scheduled as I speak for the next 3 months, and then hopefully be submitting it for process through clearance later this summer. And we're very excited about this, this important and actually mandated strategic plan. Finally, let me end with a program that has been very much endorsed by our staff. The Brother, You're on My Mind is a particular program that focuses on African American men and mental health. Men in general are less emotive. They don't express as much. As a clinician, I'm very sensitive to that. Frequently, everything's okay, but then you have to dig in a little bit. And this is really focused on depression. We know depression is common. 5–10% of the adults have major depression. It's also the main risk factor for suicide, which is the mortality aspects of mental health that we most worry about, and that we haven't figured out how to really decrease or prevent, despite many years of research. So, Brother, You're on My Mind is a community service, as an engagement for African American men, and NIMHD is proud to be supporting it. So. Thank you for your attention, and I thank you for having us come. Dr. Lin, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia Oh, for your great presentation. I'm really looking forward to learn more about the fascinating work that you have been talking about. Thank you. Our final guest this morning, very important, is Dr. Gary Gibbons, Director of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute at NIH. He is a cardiologist who joined NIH in year 2012. He has also held faculty position at Stanford University, Harvard Medical School, and Morehouse School of Medicine. At Morehouse, he founded the Cardiovascular Research Institute, one of the first of its kind at the Historical Minority Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Gary Gibbons.
Well, good morning. It's a real privilege to be part of this meeting this morning, and the esteemed panelists. It's been actually quite inspirational for me, and an opportunity to share a little bit about our perspective at National Institutes of Health, and particularly National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, where it's my privilege to be the director. It is indeed a privilege of public service, and indeed that was part of my inspiration this morning, is that we've all been part of a similar calling, if you will. That's what we share as an HHS family, is that commitment to serve our nation, and to do so in a way that brings health and science to all communities in a way that's transformative. And as I took on this mission of turning discovery science into the health of the nation, it struck me about this Black History Month celebration, about how all of us came to this point of service. Certainly, this was not something I designed as well. And I reflected on the fact that I am a grandson. My grandmother was born into a family in rural Georgia as a sharecropper's daughter, just a couple generations away from slavery. And at that time, a little black girl wasn't valued so much to have the need for an education. So she barely could read and write, and actually became a domestic, cleaned floors for other families all her life, all the way through to her 70s. And so she was always my inspiration, taught me so much about a work ethic that I hold to this day. And I was intrigued when there was banter about Harvard and Yale. I, as I said, went to Princeton. And so, I remember my grandmother coming to those graduations. And so for the daughter of a sharecropper, a couple generations from slavery, to see her grandson graduate from Princeton, I think tells you a lot about Black history and where we've come as a country. But I hope that part of what we do today is to make history. That's why we have this opportunity in service to our country to make an impact, to make a difference. And I believe that's why all of us are here and do what we do every day. We have our challenges, as shown on this slide. These are parts of the portfolio of our mission of heart, lung, and blood diseases. And these are amongst the major killers of men, women, of all races and ethnicities in this country. And major cause of disability among children and asthma, and a particularly poignant disease and sickle cell disease as well. I'll touch on each of those and what we're hoping to do to make history in addressing health inequities. One of the other elements is that we build on really a legacy of excellence in public service in the NHLBI. We're actually celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. And so we have the privilege of continuing that legacy. The National Heart Institute, it was known then by, signed into law by Harry Truman, began really at the height of an epidemic that was going on in coronary heart disease in the middle of the last century. And as a result of a lot of investments in biomedical research, changes in public health practice, tremendous progress has been made in reducing that scourge, that epidemic, over the last 50 to 70 years. And yet, despite all that success, it has not been uniform to all communities. There's still some that are lagging behind. The most recent cardiovascular mortality statistics are shown here graphically and geographically. And you'll notice a striking pattern, how it's affecting America's heartland. You can sort of see that band of red there in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Arkansas, down into the southeast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. So these are communities that appear to be particularly burdened by cardiovascular mortality, suggesting that indeed we're not really fulfilling our mission until our discoveries and our advances penetrate all communities throughout our country. In that regard, that geographic pattern also tells us something. Clearly, as Alicia Oh was mentioning, we know a lot about biology and genetics, but we also are starting to appreciate, again, how much place matters. And that in addressing health inequities, we appreciated it really as a complex problem. If it was simple, we would have solved it over the last 25 years. And its complexity tells us that we probably have to attack it in a very strategic way, probably at multiple levels, and as a systems sort of problem, a systems approach that appreciates that we're dealing with determinants of health that not only relate to the individual, the individual's biology and genetic makeup, but that they are embedded within a family, within a community, within a social environment, And all of these elements work together in an interplay to influence health and health outcomes. And indeed, as an HHS family, I believe this challenges us. If we're going to solve this problem, we're probably going to have to attack it in these multiple angles and in a full-pronged approach that appreciates this complexity as it really cuts across all our mission areas. Indeed, when it comes to hypertension, a key driver of disparities in mortality, strokes, heart attacks, we see these, the higher prevalence amongst African Americans in particular. Not only increased prevalence of hypertension, but when it comes to controlling that hypertension, that we often find it's inadequately controlled. Hopefully the Surgeon General's is under control. I take my medications as well for hypertension, but we can do better. In fact, one of the studies that is shown here of our cohorts, the Cardia study, has been tracking individuals since they're teenagers and young adults. And one of the observations was that if an African American grew up in a segregated neighborhood and remained in that segregated neighborhood, their blood pressures tended to be higher than those that grew up in a segregated neighborhood and then moved to one that was more diverse. We don't know all the causality of that, but it suggests something about how that local environment may have been getting under the skin and affecting their trajectory of blood pressure, which again was going to have longer-term implications. Indeed, as we look at these patterns of where people live and work and play and pray, and how much that influences their health and their health outcomes, we're starting to gain greater insights in the complexity of all those factors and determinants. And one of the key observations I think we're starting to understand is how these social determinants get under the skin and can change biological systems and the pathobiology of disease. One of those areas relates to trying to understand, well, why would living in a food desert or having less access to a healthy lifestyle affect your body and your blood pressure? And well, it's turning out that when it comes to fruits and vegetables, you know they're colorful. And if you ask, well, why are they so colorful? Well, there are particular chemicals, phytochemicals, that are part of their texture that gives them that color, but also gives them other properties, properties about how they affect free radicals that influences biology. Moreover, we're learning that you have literally trillions of organisms living on you and in you and around you. Sometimes people get the willies when I say that. but those organisms are coexisting with you. They're helping you digest your food. And they're metabolizing what you eat as much as you are. In fact, they're helping you metabolize it. What they then metabolize comes back and absorbed in your body. And what we're learning is that shape of how much fruits and vegetables changes the balance of those microbes living in you and changes the balance of what they generate in your body. And we're learning that that can affect your predisposition to obesity, diabetes, and indeed heart disease. And so there's now greater understanding of the mechanisms that are involved in which where you live can actually affect your DNA, that change your epigenome, changes your microbiome, changes your immune system, all of which influence the course of disease. This is important because as we see those factors that are determining that high blood pressure, we know that we have to do things to combat it. And certainly at the NHLBI, we're very pleased with this SPRINT trial that was done in which we compared a more aggressive targeting strategy or lower target blood pressure in hopes of preventing heart attacks and strokes more effectively. And indeed, I think it's a landmark study. In order to pursue that, though, it's notable that we wanted to be sure that this was generalizable to all the different communities that might be affected. And a critical aspect of our research agenda needs to be sure that we're inclusive of a diverse population that reflects America. And indeed, I think the Sprint investigators were very effective at doing so. And as a result, we have a sense that, indeed, that aggressive approach has benefits across various demographic groups. But it's not enough just to do these trials, these clinical efficacy trials. It's important also that the results have an impact and a penetration and an uptake in all the communities that are most burdened by these risk factors. And so the work still remains, and we hopefully can partner with many of you to see how we can be sure that these new insights that are going to save American lives really gets to them in the real world and not just in clinical studies. Part of that involves funding implementation research, in which we try to promote innovation and new knowledge about how we can ensure that what we know actually has an impact and go from knowledge to action that has impact on the health of the nation. We've done some of that collaboration. One here, a collaboration with PCORI related to innovation approaches in health systems as to see how we can indeed improve hypertension control. And indeed, many of those studies are taking this sort of multi-level systems approach to see how we can enhance the control of hypertension and have its impact. Let me pivot quickly to lung disease and asthma. And where, again, we had disparities, and appreciate the Surgeon General sharing his history. That is not an uncommon story in which there's a greater burden of asthma here. As Alicia Oh would point out, often we recognize that the Hispanic population is defined, it's not monolithic. Indeed, Puerto Ricans have a particularly high risk of asthma as well, and suffer from a number of health disparities in this space. So from ER visits to hospitalizations to death, there's clearly a great burden for this condition. And it is really one of those, again, where the whole environment and where you live and work and play makes a difference in terms of your life course and your health outcomes. This is also an opportunity, we believe, to not only advance basic science and clinical trials, but to see how indeed we can recognize this as a multi-level disorder that needs multi-level interventions in order to have reduce those disparities. And indeed, are funding projects that are taking a community perspective, bringing together primary care, schools, the family, the whole environment that surrounds that child and influences whether indeed they're going to have a good outcome or not, how we can potentially prevent them from having to go to the emergency room as a failure of our therapies. And my final example relates to sickle cell disease. This is a disorder that, as you're all aware, was picked up and appreciated actually by a cardiologist who recognized these strange cells that were sickle-shaped. And about in 1946, Linus Pauling actually found the molecular defect that in the hemoglobin molecule that generated this abnormal sickling pattern. So it was actually one of the first molecular disorders in this age of personalized precision medicine. We've known about what causes it for a long time. And yet, despite that discovery, many years ago, this was almost a death sentence to have this diagnosis. Very few live beyond childhood. Fortunately, related to some of the clinical trials done by the NHLPI and NIH, that life expectancy has expanded from a death sentence in childhood to 40s and 50s. But that's still not good enough. Clearly, we have some unfinished business when it comes to sickle cell. As many of you are aware, and actually was pointed out, this is a disorder that causes death in children still, as shown on that map. We did a clinical trial to reduce stroke. And one of the things we found is that children with sickle cell disease between 2 and 5, 1 out of 5 of those kids already had a sign of a silent stroke. Can you imagine that? A 7-year-old with a stroke. You know, my mother died of a stroke in her 70s, but a 7-year-old with a stroke. And yet we understand at the most basic molecular level. I think that that's something that's unacceptable. I think that's something where we can make history. And indeed, we believe that the technologies are at hand where we should be able to transform the lives of a whole generation of people living with sickle cell disease. We now have tools that enable clinicians and scientists to actually correct that molecular defect, sort of CRISPR-Cas technologies, gene editing tools that basically are like molecular scissors that could cut out the abnormal DNA code and then ensure that the right code is put in. That capability exists today. And I believe that we are on the threshold of transforming a whole generation of people living with sickle cell disease as a result. So we're committed to a full court press on sickle cell, in which we want to go from literally nucleotides to neighborhoods, from basic clinical trials, implementation science, including this leading edge genetic curative therapies. We hope to do that in public-private partnership, in which industry can contribute as well with new technologies and tools. We see this as I believe, a public health imperative and an incredible scientific opportunity that will make such a transformative effect on a group of patients with a rare disorder. This is something we can do as a HHS family collectively, because indeed it involves so many elements that are part of our portfolio and part of our public service. We believe that as part of this circle of partners, we can make history. We can make Black history by eliminating those strokes in those children and having a stroke-free generation. I hope you'll join us in this effort. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gary, for your wonderful presentation. Sickle cell disease is of particular interest to me, and I'm happy to see that as one of your priorities. This will conclude our program, and let's thank all of our speakers for helping to deliver such a great event. Thank you. As I said earlier at the beginning, these are leaders who are helping to guide the department's work to improve the health and health care for minorities across the nation. And they are provide very useful guidance and information for us this morning. Thanks to everyone here and on the live stream here for joining us for this observance of Black History Month. Thank you for all of the work that you do and that we do together to reduce the health disparity and advance the health equity. This is crucial work, and it is helpful to move us closer to be a nation where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential for good health. Our country spends a lot of money, probably spend most of the money around the world, but our health care rating probably somewhere around 30, 35 around the world. So I hope we work together. Important is we eliminate the health disparity. I think our nation will have a good health in the future. So we hope to see you again in April during our National Minority Health Month. And thank you for coming. I want to thank you, my staff, and all the staff in HSS helped to put this together. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Chris, for you taking the picture. Thank you all. We'll see you again. Thank you.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at taxpayer expense.